Armageddon Survival Plan, the key. For printed version please contact jar at jartruth.net. Chapter 12. Prince Michael/Christ comes again. Jesus, the Savior, told his disciples that he would come again, and, on his second coming, he would not speak to them in proverbs and parables, but would show them clearly about God. John 16, verse 25. John the disciple was told, and it is written in his Revelation 10, verse 7, that when Christ comes again, the mysteries of God shall be finished, as God has promised his servants the prophets. He said that, just before the last day, when everyone is due to be judged, on his individual merits, and by whose mark he wears, he, Christ, would come again, and publish the truth of God, gospel, to all nations of the world. Mark 13, verse 10, and enlighten the whole world. Matthew 24, verse 27 and Luke 17, verse 24 and 2 Thessalonians 2, verse 8. Once this has been done, God will hold back the last day, until Christ has sealed the mark of God into the foreheads of the people who are going to survive the fire. Revelation 7, verse 3, and give mankind one last chance to mend its evil ways. If the world does not mend its ways, and if everyone doesn't start to love his neighbor as much as himself, and keep the commandments, and do God's will, and learn to be good, then the last day will come. Malachi 4, verse 6. Christ will then shed the human animal body that he has been wearing, to get God's truth published, and will come as his real self, with his angels, and destroy all of the souls who wear the mark of Satan, and Satan himself, with the fire. Daniel 12, verse 1. Christ, obviously, will not be wearing the Son of Mary, with holes in his hands and feet, because, as on the first coming, 2,000 years ago, he will need to learn, and be trained by God, in private, all about life on earth in the new times, because the world has changed a great deal, in 2,000 years. He would have to grow up, like before, as a normal man, in England, and learn what it is like to be a human plus being, in the new times, and how to overcome the temptations of those new times. He would have to learn many different things, and travel widely, to gather a complete understanding of how things are in various parts of the world, with their varied customs and religions, in order to get a good general background of worldly matters. Then, if mankind decides that it wants to change and survive, he will be familiar with the world and its problems, and be able to put things right, with his Father's help and guidance. Jesus has already said that, on Christ's second coming, he would not be able to work miracles the easy way, and grant people's wishes. John 16, verse 22, 23, and 26, because it would already be too late for that, and that people had already had their miracles, and 2,000 years to follow his example. They should, by now, have learned to be good, and have gone home, a long time ago. Christ would have to do everything the hard way, just to prove to people that, with enough faith, it can be done, by following God's orders, using the force, in Satan's territory, and show that one man can move a mountain of evil, anywhere in the world, without being able to walk on water. Before Prince Michael could start his real work in the world, his new body, with its new name, Revelation 3, verse 12, would have to reach its late 30s in age, and he would have had to have learned to control the animal he was using, and how to overcome, and resist, all the different types of temptation, and have already received a perfect, and secret training, just like before. The reason that Jesus told his disciples, that he had many things still to tell them, but that they could not bear them yet, was because, if he had told them all the things in this book, even they would have thought he was crazy, like many people already did. How could you explain spaceships, etc., to the simple mentality of 2,000 years ago? You have to consider what the mentality was like in those times. Spaceships? Question mark. Angels? Question mark. Other planets? Question mark. Souls? Question mark. Reform school for another planet? Question mark. Space travel? Question mark. There will be people, even now, after 2,000 years, who will not believe, even though they have seen Earth's own very crude spaceships, etc. After the first coming, the way had to be prepared for the second, so that when Christ came again, people would be able to believe the truth. Daniel 12, verse 4. Since then, the world has gradually been prepared, and sent technology, little by little, so that now, mankind knows there are other planets, and people have built their own crude spaceships, which are only children's toys, just like nuclear missiles, compared to the technology of home. The technology on this planet is prehistoric, compared to the technology of Venus. You have been sent just enough, to prepare you for the truth, and no more. Think about the technology necessary, to build a living organic computer, human body, which self-repairs and self-reproduces, not crude bits of wire and transistors, and lumps of metal and plastic, like human-made computers. Put your egos away, people. No one on this planet has ever invented anything. Specific people were prepared by God, little by little, and then, when they were ready, He told them, by telepathy, from out of the blue, or from God knows where, and that is exactly from where, and how, these ideas came. The world has been sent communications technology, in all its many varied forms, to make the publishing of God's truth, to all the nations of the world, quick and easy. Satan has inflated people's egos, into claiming the glory, and saying that they had invented these things. Surah 96, verse 4-8, and he has obviously given all the evil ideas, by telepathy. The glory belongs, as it always has, to God. God's is the power, the kingdom, and the glory, forever. How many thousands of years would it take you all, to stop letting Satan deceive you, by using your egos and arrogance against you, to put blinkers on you, and lead you anywhere he chooses? Humility and faith are the only way, to prevent that from happening, and, from them, comes the truth, and the truth will set you free. John 8, verse 32. King of Kings Bible. John 8, verse 23. Jesus said that he would come, and destroy religions. Mark 13, verse 1 and 2, at a time when no one thought, or believed, that he would come. Luke 12, verse 40, and that the times would be like the times of Noah, with violence everywhere, and the times of Sodom and Gomorrah. The world today is just like those times, where everyone is motivated only by sex and money, and Satan is in control again, which means that Christ's work will be so much harder, because he will find it extremely difficult, under those conditions, to find people to help him, and will have to fight against all, and incredible odds. Luke 17, verse 26. Because of the fact, that evil will be in control, of all the various sections, and levels, of all the different types of societies, people's hearts will have grown cold, and hard-hearted, and they will not be motivated by love. Matthew 24, verse 12, only by sex and money. People will not willingly help Christ, as they should, until he declares who he is, and his new name, and, even then, he will only be helped by the people who will believe him, and who will not think that he is just another crazy man, with a Jesus complex. It will have been made even more difficult for him, by all the crazy, false Christs, who have preceded him. Matthew 24, verse 23-27 and Mark 13, verse 5 and 6 and Luke 17, verse 23 and 24, and by the false prophets, that is organized religions. The humble, who are rich in spirit, and who have seen through, and not been deceived and fooled, by organized religions, will recognize him, accept him, love him, and ask his help, and to be allowed to help him. Jesus said that the times, of his second coming, would be like the days of Sodom and Gomorrah. Luke 17, verse 29 and 30, with homosexuality, promiscuity, perversion and depravity running riot, and out of control, see chapter 6. He said that there would be wars and rumors of wars, famines, pestilences, and troubles, earthquakes in diverse places, nation rising against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and when you see Jerusalem, surrounded by armies, the time is near. Luke 21, verse 20. Those who persevere in keeping the commandments and doing God's will until the end, and keep their faith, will survive, and not a hair of their heads shall be touched, and, because of their patience and perseverance, they own their own souls, by not having sold their souls to Satan, for earthly treasures and pleasures. Luke 21, verse 18 and 19. It says in Revelation, that no one, in the whole of creation, except the Lamb, Prince Michael/Christ, was found worthy to break the seals on the books, and to be able to understand and interpret them. Revelation chapter 5 and Isaiah 29, verse 11 and Daniel 12, verse 8 to 9 and Daniel 10, verse 21, because I and my Father are as one, in all things. If anyone, having read this book, doubts that God and Prince Michael/Christ have written it, then you are so far into Satan's grip, and insane, that there is no hope for you. Surah 2, verse 98. This book was not written after a prophet's death, by his students, or by an enlightened prisoner. It was written by God's eldest son and God himself. Daniel 10, verse 21. I am not a prisoner here, I came here voluntarily, to try to help you all, to survive, and to give you all one last chance. With this book, the mystery of God is now finished, and his truth published, and soon, it and the gospel of the kingdom will have been published, to all nations. Mark 13, verse 10. If you think that anyone, other than Prince Michael, except for my Father himself, would be able, not only to break the seals on the books, but also to have a spirit, strong enough, and with enough courage, to write and have this book published, in the world of today, and to challenge the entire world, and do battle against Satan, on his own ground, with all 6 billion of his evil angels to help him, then you are crazy and are calling God a liar. This whole world is crazy, and the time has now come, for you all, to learn to be sane, or die, soon, and I mean very soon. It should not be too much of a surprise, to those of you who can see how crazy mankind is, to find out that this planet is a maximum security prison, for the criminally insane. Some of you are less insane than others, but, unfortunately, the people who are the most insane, and who think they are the most sane, classic symptoms of insanity, are those who are ruining things, for everyone else, by running and ruining the world for Satan, who, himself, is totally, criminally insane. Satan is ruling the world, right now, through those very people, who are in human governments and religious organizations. Ephesians 6, verse 11 and 12. This planet is being run on Satan's logic, which is actually illogic, because he is insane. If this world's logic was logical, then the world would be getting better, but we can all see that it is rapidly getting worse. However, man's stupid arrogance will not allow him to admit that his methods and logic do not work, and turn around, and go back to God's real sane logic. Mankind is insane. If I were to ask you, most of you will agree with that statement. Then you would tell me that it is everyone else, and that you are sane. It's always someone else, it's never you. You know that, if you don't keep the commandments, and do God's will, and learn to be good, then you are going to be executed. If you didn't know, then you know now. Are you keeping the commandments, and doing God's will, so that you can survive? If you are not, then isn't that insanity? Isn't exchanging immortality, for worldly possessions, that you can never keep, insanity? You cannot learn to be sane, by going to human psychiatrists, because they too are insane by God's standards, and also work on this world's, Satan's, illogic, and do not really know what they are doing. The only person, who can teach you real logic, and to be really sane, by God's standards and not insane mankind's, Satan's illogical standards, is God himself, by you doing his will, and learning, from him, directly, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year, year after year. You cannot achieve anything, by talking to him for 10 minutes, or even 1 hour a day, because, if you talk to him for only 1 hour a day, you are talking to Satan for the other 23 hours a day, and doing Satan's will, leading you to the fire. Please don't force me to have to unsuspend your death sentences, and execute you, on the last day, after all the trouble that my father and I have been to, over all these thousands of years. I do not want to have to execute, even one of you, but don't let that fact fool you, into thinking that I won't. My Father gave you all time to repent, and he has promised to destroy all those who do not repent. He always keeps his promises, and so do I. I have come here, to try to help you to survive, and I asked my Father, a year ago, 1985, to let me try to save each and every one of you, and I hope, with all of my soul/being, that you will let me. If you don't believe me, and let me, then you will have exercised your free will, which is your right, and you will have chosen to be executed. The rest of you had better make a fresh start, today. I can help you all, if you let me, but if I only managed to save one soul/being, my mission, and all the unpleasantness that I have been subjected to, and had to suffer, at your hands, will have been worthwhile. Those of you, on higher spiritual levels, had better stop wasting, and abusing, your superior intelligence, to steal money from the people on the lower levels, using your own homemade human laws/legislation, to keep you out of human prisons, and use your intelligence, to face, and pass, your harder tests, instead. Start off, by setting a good example, with deeds, and not just words, and show the others the way, and the good that you are capable of. Be grateful, for the greater sensitivity that accompanies more awareness. It is not the curse, that it often seems, it is a blessing in disguise. Use it, to your spiritual advantage, in your tests. The more sensitive you are, the greater is the pain that you feel, in the self-crucifixions, and the more points you can earn. Because you feel more pain, this should give you more encouragement, to get rid of the self, as the pain is attached to the self, and, when it goes, the pain goes with it. Once you have destroyed the self, your greater sensitivity will bring you greater spiritual joy, instead of the pain of self-crucifixion. The insensitivity of people at lower levels protects and shields them from pain, until they are ready for something more difficult, so that they will not be discouraged, or scared off. Think how much pain Jesus had to suffer, on the cross, with his maximum possible sensitivity. The higher you climb, the tougher it becomes, and, consequently, the more points you can gain, or earn, by winning. Be grateful, that you have been given a difficult test, and the chance to earn a greater reward. Find the ladders to heaven, and climb them, but, beware of the snakes, serpents/Satan, and their downfalls. Snakes and ladders, game for children, is another clue, that God has sent for you, in your childhood. There are clues everywhere, in the game of life, but you have to open your spiritual eyes, to be able to see them, and find them, and to be able to recognize them, as clues. Just to give you a start, I will give you a few examples. Superman immortal, indestructible, can fly, cannot tell lies, eyes like fires. Revelation 19, verse 12. Snakes and children's game, ladders leading up to heaven, to be searched out, and ladders snakes to be avoided, at all cost, because they bring you rapidly back down, to earth. If Rudyard Kipling. See Appendix, Song The Quest. Joe Darian. See Appendix, Book The Picture of Dorian Gray. Oscar Wilde. Film, The San Francisco Earthquake. Sodom and Gomorrah. Star Trek. Mr. Spock, half human, uses logic, spiritual, and not human animal emotion, and he has perfect control over his human half, and its emotions. One episode entitled, The Enemy Within. Film Star Wars, George Lucas, How to Learn to Become a Jedi Knight, and Learn Control Over the Human Self, so that you can use the Force, to overcome evil. There are thousands of references to stars, and lucky stars, etc., etc. You are surrounded by clues. Instead of playing silly, time-wasting, human games, why don't you spend your time, profitably, by playing God's game of life and death? If people spent as much time, on their spiritual health, and exercising and strengthening their spiritual willpower, as they do on their physical health, with exercising and bodybuilding, and eating the right foods, they would really be getting somewhere. If you have a healthy spirit, it automatically maintains a healthy body, without having to do anything else. A good healthy spirit, which will live forever, is far more important, than a muscle-bound, healthy, throwaway body. Those of you, who break the commandments, even in your thoughts, and believe that you have got away with it, just because no one, that you can see, has seen you, and no human plus being has caught you, are only fooling yourselves. God has seen everything that you have ever done, and he knows everything that you have ever thought. Job 42, verse 2 and Surah 2, verse 77, including right now. Those of you, who are cheating on your partner, by committing adultery, are really cheating yourselves, because, even if your partner doesn't know, God knows. Don't think that because it isn't like killing, or stealing, that it doesn't matter, because it is just as important as the others. You gave your word of honor, with God as a witness, and you are breaking your word of honor, and selling your soul to Satan. You are also proving, to God, that you cannot be trusted, and that you have no honor, so how can you then expect Him to let you live, and come home? By breaking one of the commandments, you are guilty of breaking them all, because it means that you are still doing Satan's will, and not God's will. The Muslims consider the so-called Christian world to be decadent, and evil, and they are correct, although they themselves are far from good, with their religious arrogance and fanaticism, which allows them to be manipulated, very easily, by Satan, into murdering, and thinking that they are doing it in God's name. John 16, verse 2. However, at least they have not had the audacity to make up their own laws that totally conflict with and oppose God's laws, like the Western world has done. Satan has really had success in the West, where people have not only had the audacity to make their own laws up, but have had the supreme audacity to make up laws, to say that ignorance of their laws, man's own stupid, unjust laws, is no excuse. Just who do they think they are, that they think that they have the right to not only make up their own laws, legislation, but then to say that, if you break their unlawful laws unknowingly, then you are guilty of a crime? How can you be guilty of breaking a law that is itself unlawful? When did they get God's permission to make up their own laws? They didn't. Deuteronomy 4, verse 2 and Deuteronomy 12, verse 32. What incredible arrogance and stupidity. There is a great difference between ignorance of man's laws/legislation, and ignorance of God's laws, because it is impossible to be ignorant of God's laws. God tells each and every soul what is right, and what is wrong, telepathically, before they do anything wrong. Who tells you about unlawful man-made laws/legislation? Why do you all allow this injustice? The majority, who are spineless eunuchs, and who strain at a gnat, shout and complain about little things, and who swallow a camel, say nothing about big things. Matthew 23, verse 24, have done exactly that, and have quietly accepted this gross injustice, and thereby allowed civilized, society, to take away their God-given rights. Satan has used women, just as he did in the Garden of Eden, and has continued to do, throughout history, to do evil and get the eunuchs, in Western governments. Matthew 19, verse 12, second type of eunuch, to change God's laws, and give equality to women, most of whom are not really women. There is nothing feminine about them. They are trying to be men, in women's bodies, without having earned their right to be men. Then, once having infiltrated women, amongst men in power, and having given them a say, in the running of things, Satan has used them to change more laws. This has brought about the breakdown of the family unit, which has always been the foundation of a good society, and, because of their having no code of honor, and generally being moral-less, they have made a sick joke of the institute of marriage, and are using sex to try to rule the world, for Satan. The next step was to get the eunuchs and homosexuals/sodomites in government, to make sodomy legal, and, with that, came queer liberation, which, combined with women's liberation, and the general emasculation of men, has brought about an almost total and complete reversal of God's order of things. The world, now, instead of learning to be good, and advancing towards being like Jesus, with women learning to be perfect women, so that they can eventually earn their right to become men, is now going backwards, with the castration, metaphorically, of men. Deuteronomy 23, verse 1, and their emasculation, and men going backwards, reverting to being women. The Western world has not only opened Pandora's box, it has taken the lid right off it, and the world's is not just going backwards, it is accelerating every second. The world, just like in the times of Noah and Sodom and Gomorrah, is rushing headlong to its own destruction, on the last day, except that, this time, there will be no more second chances. You have already had thousands of years, and millions of chances to get it right, and you are still here. On the last day, the women's liberationists, the homosexuals, sodomites, and anyone who teaches organized religion will be in the most danger, and first into the fire. The Muslims are far from perfect, and, because of their religious arrogance, have refused to accept that the Torah and New Testament are to be used and read as an introduction, and the first two-thirds of God's book, leading to the Quran, which is the last testament one-third of God's book, and are consequently running in circles, heading for the fire. They quite rightly resent the West's influence on their women, and the disorder and evil that it brings with it. Even though they do not know, or understand, the reasons why, they accept that God knows best, and have tried to keep to God's laws, instead of having had the audacity to change, and reverse them. The changing of God's laws, and the perverting of God's plans, has brought with it its own punishment, with a breakdown of discipline, respect and order. The widespread public display of female nudity, and exhibitionism, has brought out the base animal instincts in some men, and, with that, has come a rise in the number of rapes, and cases of child molesting, and women are reaping the consequences of what they have been sowing. Unfortunately, innocent children are also suffering. The reason that there has been a rise in the number of cases of child molesting is that little girls are the only ones left who are actually feminine, in contrast to the man-like women's libers. As the situation worsens, with girls becoming affected by liberation, at an ever-increasingly younger age, so the ages at which they get molested becomes younger, as the rapist is forced to look for femininity in a younger age group. In the rapist's tormented by Satan mentality, he is also reasserting his lost masculinity to himself, although it is only very temporarily, and even a staunch woman's liber loses her manliness in a rape situation, and becomes frightened and submissive, and therefore more feminine, in a twisted mental power struggle. Women have brought this on themselves: divine justice, karma, cause and effect, just deserts. When you refuse to obey God, you bring evil upon yourself. Legalizing homosexuality, sodomy has, naturally, brought about an increase in the molesting of little boys. Along with all this emasculation of mankind, and women's effect on things, by allowing themselves to be used unwittingly by Satan to get God's laws changed, capital and corporal punishment have been abolished in many countries, which has brought about a further perversion of God's plans. God created the bodies so that he would be able to punish and discipline the souls/beings, and people have reversed that by abolishing the punishing of the body, and have gone to Satan's standard: money. Fines are no deterrent or punishment to a thief, because money has no real value to him. It is easy come, easy go, and he just goes out and steals some more. Cutting off his hand on his second offense is not only a better punishment, but also a very effective deterrent, and prevention is always better than cure. Matthew 5, verse 30. Man's stupid logic says that the punishment should fit the crime. The punishment should prevent the crime, and lessening the punishment actually encourages crime. If a person, who is normally honest, is tempted to steal, and knows that they may only get probation, fined, or imprisonment, they are much more likely to steal than if they may lose a hand. Matthew 5, verse 28 to 32, and Matthew 18, verse 8 and 9, and Mark 9, verse 43 to 45. So, by lessening the punishment, you are actually encouraging this person to become a thief, and are helping to turn an honest person into a criminal. Then, once in prison, they are amongst criminals, and actually learn to become hardened criminals, particularly if they are young and impressionable. The same also applies to the death penalty. Deterrence is the only answer, using God's standard, not silly man's standard. With the death penalty, the soul that has lost control and has murdered is sent back to the astral plane, and God's punishment, followed by a fresh start. A prison sentence is no real deterrent, and a waste of time, and a terrible drain on society, with prisons full and overflowing, costing billions to operate, with the law-abiding people having to pay heavy taxes to finance the prisons. Prisons are no deterrent, they are like free money holiday camps, with conjugal rights, color televisions, free meals and laundry. It's almost better than having to work for a living, in some cases. The more comfortable the prisons become, the less deterrent there is, and the more you encourage people to become criminals. The system of putting people into prisons is also very unfair, because it punishes the victims and the innocent, instead of the guilty criminals, due to the fact that the victims have to pay heavy taxes to build and maintain prisons, in which to keep the very people who have wronged them. Adding insult to injury. Those taxes would be better used to compensate the victims, instead of pampering the criminals. From every angle the prison system is wrong. Having done away with corporal punishment in schools, which used to be part of the beginning of the process of learning discipline, for the children whose parents did not care, or for the children who had lost their dad, the foundation of discipline has been removed. Discipline in schools was the only discipline that some children received. Now children are growing up totally uncontrollable, with many becoming thugs and criminals, and many more being unemployable. 2 Esdras 5, verse 8. Sensible and fair corporal punishment in schools never did anyone any harm. All these things have been brought about by women's misguided influence, which they have been allowed to exercise, because of women's liberation and equality. Enoch 96, verse 12-14 and Job 2, verse 10 and Isaiah 3, verse 12, 1 Timothy 2, verse 11-14. The police and courts have also had a very bad and negative influence on society, by making it illegal and difficult to exercise your God-given human rights, to defend yourself, and to use your free will, by stopping people from fighting crime and injustice themselves, as God wants people to do. The person on the spot has the best chance of fighting evil, as and when it happens. For a police force to function properly, it has to have the cooperation of the public that it is supposed to serve. Their job is to protect, help and serve the people of their community. Satan, using his tool, money, has caused the police to alienate the public, by having laws/legislation made up, to punish people for doing nothing wrong, and then fining them. The police, then, spend the majority of their time, running around, inexpensive police cars, bought with the public's money, annoying and irritating the law-abiding public, that they are supposed to serve, for the financial gain of the police force, and the promotion of the officers involved. They also do this, because, annoying law-abiding, God's laws, citizens, and stealing their money under false pretenses, is much easier, has a greater financial gain, and is much less dangerous, than catching real criminals. This then builds a big gap, between the law-abiding public, and the policy enforcers, who cannot operate without the public's help, and it creates an ever-worsening, us and them situation, which eventually leads to a police state, and a police attitude, that says, that anyone, who is not actually a policeman, is automatically a criminal, or a potential criminal, instead of being their employers. The devil can really play with egos, and arrogance. The police should be friendly, helpful and humble. That is supposed to be why they wanted to be public servants, in the first place. Unfortunately, most of the best policemen eventually resign from the police force, human government policy enforcers, because they do not agree with police attitudes and methods, having joined the force to help people, not persecute them. The even sadder result of this is that, by leaving, instead of fighting to change their colleagues' attitudes, they are helping to make the situation worse. No criminal is really afraid of human police, who cannot be everywhere at once, or on the spot, and who do not have the help of the public, because they have alienated them. If criminals were afraid of the police, they would not be criminals. Guns were originally invented for hunting food, and for protection against wild animals, and also for self-defense against evil aggression, because a small or old person could not defend himself/herself against a stronger aggressor. Guns are an equalizer. No one has the right to take away the rights that God gave to you, one of which is your right to self-defense against evil and aggression, real and not imaginary, unless they can replace it with something better. The police, because of their own cowardice, have made it illegal to own a gun, and to defend yourself, and have given you nothing in return, because they cannot possibly be with you all of the time, and they are so busy chasing honest people for money, that they do not have the time to protect the public from, and to catch real criminals. Prevention is always better than cure, and a young thug would think twice about attacking an old lady, or gentleman, if that old person possibly had a gun, and could shoot them, lawfully, in accordance with God's laws. Exodus 22, verse 2. Given a perfect situation, in a society, if you were to disarm anyone, you would disarm the criminals, wouldn't you? So what does man do, with his stupid illogic? He decides to disarm the law-abiding public, who are no danger to anyone, and leave violent and vicious criminals with weapons, and then, to make the situation even worse, he does away with the only other deterrent to criminals, the death penalty. The harmless, law-abiding public, are then left, totally defenseless, against armed, vicious criminals, whilst the police are busy stealing money from motorists, under unlawful human laws/legislation. Do you think that makes sense? Totally insane. You voted for these lunatics, and their insane, unlawful laws/legislation, human government policies, enforced by police, so you are now suffering all this violence and crime, divine justice. Isaiah 3, verse 12 to 15. It is now illegal to defend yourself, your family, or the weak, and, the way it is going, it will soon be illegal to be a man. The police say that, we cannot have the public taking its law into its own hands. The law belongs to the public, not to the police, and should never have been taken out of the public's hands. The police's job is only to ensure that the public, in executing its laws, do not exceed, or break those laws themselves, and to help the public, both to investigate crimes, and maintain law and order. Unfortunately, they no longer act as public servants, but as human government licensed thieves, and a law unto themselves. Instead of the public telling the police what to do, the police now dictate to the public. The police, policy enforcers, not law enforcers, have become a big stick that the rich use to beat the poor. You all have a voice and a vote, and can change the laws to be for your benefit, not the benefit of the criminals. Man's unlawful and unjust laws/legislation punish the innocent, whereas God's laws punish the guilty. Legal precedents must be abolished, and every case heard on its own merits, with other cases used only as a guide, if necessary, not as a preset rule, so that justice will be done, instead of injustice in the name of precedents. Amos 5, verse 7, 10, and 24, and Amos 6, verse 12, and Habakkuk 1, verse 4. Some courts are even talking of abolishing the swearing before God, on the Bible, to tell the truth. No criminal is afraid of courts, and self-appointed arrogant men, they just laugh at them. Fear of God's punishment can be the only realistic deterrent. Amos 6, verse 12 and 13. Human laws/legislation, as well as being no deterrent, and encouraging people to become criminals, also encourage the public to become totally irresponsible, by fooling people into thinking that they can do anything they like, believing that they have got away with it, so long as no human policeman catches them. God's laws, statutes and judgments, in complete contrast, punish only the guilty, and make people aware that they are responsible, not only for their deeds, but also their words and thoughts, and, thereby, make people become more and more responsible. When is all this insanity going to stop? When are you going to stop being so stupid and arrogant as to think that you know better than God, and start to live by His rules, and not your own, Satan's really self-destructive ones? You have to fight evil and Satan, each and every one of you. That is the only way home, and to make the world a better place to live. Come on, old people, set an example to the youth. Teach them better manners, morals and respect. Read Ecclesiasticus and Proverbs. Get the laws changed back to God's laws. Don't be afraid of human death. If your body dies in God's service, you will either go home or get a brand new, young, healthy body. What have you got to lose? Only your soul, if you do not. You all say, I wish I could be young again. You can be. Let go. Find some faith, and let go. Why suffer old age? Don't let Satan fool you into thinking that, because you are old, you don't need to bother. Because you only have a short time left, and so, resign yourself to putting up with everything, the way it is, until your body dies, thinking that it will then no longer be your problem. That is a very selfish attitude, what about your grandchildren? And we'll never get you off this evil, violent prison planet, lunatic asylum. You are only cheating yourselves, because you have to come back into the world again, which has now become even worse, because you did not do anything about making it better. That is how the world has become worse and worse and worse. You cannot cheat God, you are only cheating yourselves. Western, civilized, society, with its collective arrogance, in believing that it knows how to run the world, better than God does, and by moving away from fearing God, to trying to make men afraid of silly human laws/legislation, and society itself, has poisoned itself and is dying, rapidly. The only antidote is to learn humility, and the power of love and God, and to reinstate God as the ruler of the world, and dissolve all the human laws, and use God's laws. Matthew 5, verse 17 and 18 and Malachi 4, verse 4. This can be done very easily, because these human laws are unconstitutional, as they conflict with the Bible, upon which you swear. Deuteronomy 4, verse 2, Deuteronomy 12, verse 32, and the Quran, and with God's divine justice, upon which the legal systems are supposed to be based. Being unconstitutional, they can, therefore, easily be wiped off the statute books. Society, with its lack of faith in God's wisdom and His promises, having made up its own continually lowering moral standards, with its own stupid laws/legislation, instead of, and in the place of, justice, cannot possibly survive. Today, all you have is thousands of laws/legislation, but no justice. How bad do things have to get, before you can see your own lunacy? The police and doctors and politicians have got to stop trying to play at being God, and filling, to bursting point, the prisons and hospitals, in a continually worsening situation, due to their total incompetence, and their arrogant refusal to admit that they have made mistakes, and are going the wrong way. Learn humility, and admit your mistakes, and turn around, before it is too late. Can you not see what you are doing to yourselves? There are none so blind, as those who do not want to see, because they are blinded by their own arrogance. Isaiah 42, verse 19.